welcome to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm Mina and Rzouki, and I'm joined by my usual co-host, Gabriella Marcotti. And of course, we have a new guest today, that is Andy Brassell. Welcome to you both.
Not really new, is it? We've had him on before, but
okay,
it's great to have him here in person.
New for this week.
Yeah.
New for this week.
I like three-dimensional Andy Brassell a lot better than I like sort of flat, two-dimensional Andy Brassell.
I know what you mean when you just see a face, right?
Exactly. You can touch him, you can feel him, see?
I swear he is real. It's been an emotional weekend in Italy. It's been a fantastic weekend all over Europe in general. We've now found out the champions of all the countries except for maybe France, which we will find out next week. But today we'll be chatting to you about world football in general, and we're going to start off with my favorite league, Italy. So we've lost, well, I was going to say Warriors of the Night, but considering I don't know what that term means to Gab, we're going to say we lost Del Piero. He's only got one game left, which will be the Coppa Italia. We saw Rino Gattuso crying, we saw Inzaghi crying, Alessandro Nesta, Clarence Seedorf, Zambrotta all waved goodbye to Milan. What do you guys think? This is it, a new era. Is it all over, and is Juventus going to start a new winning cycle?
Well, obviously Del Piero was a fantastic player for Juve. I think for most of his 19 years he was a real class act, and I think an inspiration even to neutrals. But I mean, it's momentous, he's going away and so on. But the reality is Del Piero wasn't a part of this Juve side this season. He was there, he was in the dressing room, he didn't create problems. But I think it's quite clear that, in some ways, I don't think his departure is going to affect Juve in any way. And in the same way, if you look at those Milan players, with the exception of Nesta, who could still turn it on, as we saw, most of these other guys, Gattuso struggled with injuries.
You don't think Seedorf?
Seedorf is the wild card, but Seedorf, we're not sure he's going. Seedorf has surprised us so many times. But what I love, Andy, is the fact that we don't know where these guys are going. The possibility of Seedorf going to Brazil actually really excites me. I'm blanking on it, but who was it? Petkovic. Do you remember Petkovic, the legendary Yugoslav who moved to...
Very successful, but a very rare example of a successful overseas player in
But
Brazilian
they idolized
football.
it. He was like better in Brazil than he was in Europe.
Yeah.
That's what I loved about it.
I think Seedorf will be great wherever he goes. But I want us to concentrate on Juventus clinching the title. And whether you think... No, simply because we're going to talk to about Milan afterwards. I think this is a huge momentous occasion for a club that's gone 6 years without really winning anything.
Well, you won the Serie B title, though. That was...
a heck of an achievement in the circumstances,
it was
has to be
definitely a
said.
heck of an achievement. And I think this is definitely a Scudetto for the champions who decided to stay with the old lady despite the circumstances, like your Trezeguets and your Camoraneses and, of course, Del Piero and Gianluigi Buffon. Do you think that this is the start of a new cycle, considering the fact that Milan have to start from afresh? So do Inter. They're going through their own sort of revolutionizing period. Then you've got Napoli that may or may not keep their stars. Udinese that's constantly selling.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting point that you say about the possibility of a new era when we're talking so much about Del Piero. Because, of course, I think it's interesting. As Gab said, he contributed to a certain extent. The late goal against Lazio, for example, is something we really think about. But I find it extraordinary they had to rely on that, because people said at the start of the season, Juventus have got quite a thin squad, they've got a good first 11, but they'll struggle to change things up.
Yeah.
I looked at the squad and I didn't think that was the case, but attacking-wise, they really did struggle with that. So I think it's not just how Milan and Inter will react, but how Juventus build on this. Because, in another season, all those draws could have really cost them. Now, it's clear that Conte has sort of engineered this real togetherness and there's real doggedness. And I think if you saw in the Coppa Italia semi-final, they came back with that Vucinic goal, for example. That's a really good example of that shows the attitude they had that got them through the season. But still, those draws could have cost them. They definitely need something at the sharp end.
But I think
something they can solve with money?
Well, yeah, money solves a lot of problems. But I think, realistically, I think this is a great time to be a Juve fan, because commercially they have all their ducks in the row. That hasn't been the problem. The problem's been since they came back. They made some very foolish decisions, I think, in terms of transfers, and maybe in terms of managers as well. But now they have the stadium, they've got the revenue coming in, they're ready to tap into it. And by contrast, you look at the competition, and Inter and Milan, they're going to have to cut. They don't have the stadium revenue. Yeah. They've got these. Part of the reason Milan are ditching. They're going to save themselves in like 30 million a year in wages, and they have to do that.
Million,
And more importantly, Juve get it. All this discussion, Mina, about the top player that they're going out. Like, they're not sitting there saying, "Well, this is a great team. We just need a few tweaks." No, they're saying we need a big quality striker up front. They're not even being fussy about whether it's necessarily going to be a target man or, like if you look at being linked with Higuain and Van Persie, totally different players, but they just want quality up front, and then they'll figure out what to put around them. And again, that's encouraging. They're not resting on their laurels.
And the fact that they have a coach that can sort of change the formation to bring out the best of his teams, because he didn't, he wanted to start with a 4-2-4. He wasn't really that keen on Pirlo's arrival, but he found a way of getting them through. So he'll manage as well. But we've got Tancredi with us. Tancredi Palmieri, all the way from Milano. Ciao, how are you?
Buongiorno, a bit sad because it's finished now and what a season.
It is a bit sad, but I want to talk to you about the veterans in Milan and the fact that they've now lost so many of them. What does this mean? Do you think that this is good planning, the fact that they've lost such big players, maybe not on the pitch, but certainly in the dressing room? I mean, we saw with Villarreal, they lost 2 important figures in the dressing room and they're relegated now. So what does that mean for Milan in general? They're going to have to start from afresh.
Well, I can imagine the kind of superstitions that are doing Milan fans listening to you while you are comparing Milan to Villarreal relegating. But, well, it is a big hit, I must say, because, yes, I would say the hard stage where all the Milan show was setting now is missing. The Gattuso, the Nesta, the personality, I would say. Ambrosini will be still captain, but it is trembling a bit. Technically, it's changing not that much because apart Nesta, the others were just good replacement. Van Bommel, okay, he was in the starting 11, but this year it has not been that decisive. And all in all, Allegri knows that Montolivo is coming and knows that needs more quality there in the middle. The thing that maybe still can make struggle Milan fans is that actually, in this moment, there is not a plan B. So the good plan so far was, okay, let's save these wages that we were paying to them. Totally, all these former world champions the sum was something like 10 millions of euros per year of wages that they were summing. So it is a good save. But in this moment, there is not that kind of plan B that back in the 80s and in the 90s was behind the great years and the great decades of Milan. And it's not even the kind of period where you can find some Inter that is selling almost for free Pirlo and Seedorf. So they are struggling about that. They know that they need some quality, some huge, important quality there in the middle. Someone that was Rijkaard in the 80s, someone that was Pirlo and Seedorf in the 2000s. But it's not easy because in this moment that kind of player is so expensive.
Well, Tancredi, with this in mind, I mean, there's a couple of things. Milan always spin a very good tale, but there's a bunch of things that don't add up. One is the reason these guys are also expensive is because you're paying one man, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, more money than... In fact, I think Zlatan makes about twice as much as any player, as the highest paid player in the Premier League.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just stupid.
Flamini on 4.5 million.
I mean, yeah, your friend Flamini on 4.5 million. So they've made some of those decisions. And I look at how are they going to get out of this, and they've committed money. Okay, they're like, oh look, Montolivo's free and Traore is free. But first of all, I mean, Andy, you can tell us about Traore. I mean, what do you just pick up the milkman or something? Like seriously, this is Milan. It just seems to me like let's bring another tackling dummy in there, give him a multi-year contract.
He can't believe his luck. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
And it shows when he was talking about it that he can't believe his luck.
And the other thing is his teammate, they have that giant set, because I saw them twice this year. They have this huge defender who's like 6'6". I'm blanking.
Puig Grenier.
What?
Puig Grenier.
No, he's a black guy.
Andre Luis.
No, he's French. He's young.
The thing is that lately, in the last 3 years, the policy of Galliani, the Milan CEO, of searching these free agent players, signing for them, and having some good lads so in the team that is costing not that much, lately has paid Galliani this policy. He found some good players.
Who, Taiwo? This is what Galliani says, but it's not true.
Yeah, it's true, because ever since, I feel like, it's always Galliani that we credit for these great achievements, But then you look at it and, like the Kakas, the Patos, these were all Leonardo's signings. What Galliani's gone and done is effectively brought in veterans and, a la Mourinho style, bring in Marco Van Bommel, bring on all these cheap guys.
Maxes, Yepes, this is the future.
Is it great planning on his behalf?
I mean, when the policy was, okay, let's enforce the squad with these players, it could make sense. If you bring Maxes to be the first replacement from the bench and it costs nothing, perfect. If you do the same with Bommel, perfect. But if you have to rebuild the skeleton of the team, I mean, if you still don't know what your backbone will be, that is the huge problem. That's because there is not a real plan B so far. This plan B has to pass through Thiago Silva. If they will not sell him, apparently from some declaration of Thiago Silva today, he won't go to Barcelona. Ibrahimovic, anyway, someone that is scoring so much in the league you need, but then in the midfield, so is the key part of the pitch. In the moment that Juventus set out the midfield last year with Pirlo and Vidal, in that moment they won the league.
Yeah.
Well, Tancredi, we're critical of Milan, but that's simply because we'd rather talk about them because there is a give and take there. Whereas if we talked about Inter, we would just be crucifying them because, of course, they're an even far worse run club. But I want to ask you about...
Actually, I don't agree with that, despite the fact that I think that perhaps their management is not as great as Milan's. In fact, I think Milan's management is probably the best in Serie A. But I think that what they've got is at least forward thinking. They've got young players that they can make into something great. You've got Poli, you've got Ranocchia, you've got...
Have you seen Ranocchia play any time in the last 2 years?
Okay, perhaps not.
You know Ranocchia was an Inter player who they sold and then bought him back.
Let me finish. You've got Alvarez, you've got players, you've got Coutinho that can possibly be something other than the fact that they've got a marvellous youth team. They have something going forward that I'm not too sure that Milan have. I know that you're very critical of Inter all the time.
Is that they actually have young players.
Exactly.
They don't put trust in that. And they don't, even if some bad results are coming, they don't say, okay, we are starting this, let's see in 4 months how it will be. So they don't give time. Honestly, if you look at the Inter signing the last 10 years, even in the horrible years of Inter, the youngsters that they've signed, they were almost, there was some good stars. Pirlo was signed by Inter. Just that there is not the trust, there is not the patience on the project.
Yeah, that is very much the problem with Inter. That is. But okay, speaking of a club that's badly run, let's go to one that is actually very well run in the form of Udinese, who did make third now, and now going into the Champions League, they start to go through qualifications. What a marvellous achievement for a side that for long periods of time were missing their best players. They sold off all of their best ones last season, including Zapata and Sanchez, and they still keep going. What is going on with their coach? Will he be leaving, or do you think that he'll stay on?
Well, first of all, it wouldn't be an amazing, astonishing season all across Europe. So with, with the achievement of Montpellier that can win the league, and also in Spain, Athletic Bilbao, we probably would talk just about Udinese, because arriving third in this year, they earned something like 80 million euros from the last summer transfer. Arriving third in the season where Italy is losing the 4th spot for Champions League is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Guidolin said yesterday, actually said again, that he could stop for 1 year because he feel too much pressure. But today the president of Udinese said big contract until 2015. It's just a moment he will stay. I think probably Guidolin is also feeling that frustration probably of not being appreciated enough in Italy. During the week he was asked to Guidolin also, do you think Guardiola could come to Italy? And Guidolin looked at the reporter and said, no way, you should be crazy to think about that. Because it feels like his job is not appreciated, and his job is magnificent. Actually, probably just the Conte job at the same level, but if we look what is the level of the squad, it's unbelievable.
Tancredi, thank you so much. We have to leave it there because as you know, I actually think that it's Udinese that are a great club, and yeah, Guidolin's doing well, but they were doing well before Guidolin as well.
Yes, but what they've done with him is a remarkable achievement.
I'd say getting third in 98, 99 as they did way back with Zaccheroni.
But it's business as well, isn't it? I mean,
but it's not Guidolin who does the business.
Exactly, it's the business, it's the machinery of the club, as you say, and I think it's very important for them that Granada have stayed up as well, because in La Liga, because that's a very, very interesting relationship.
Is that allowed? Should that be allowed? If you were Lord and Master of football, I mean, I'm going off topic here. Would you allow to have that relationship between Udinese and Granada? And can you explain maybe to our viewers what it is for those who don't know?
Well, of course, the fact is that the Pozzo family are major shareholders in La Liga as well. I think it's very unlikely to become a serious clash because, of course, Granada won't get into European competition. But what happens is Udinese buy up young players, loan them en bloc 10 at a time to Granada. And it's almost like...
Is that good for football?
Well, I don't know, but I think because of the fact that there's a bigger gap between richer and poorer is pragmatic. I think it's the way that clubs like Granada can survive. And of course it ends up with agents because of course the Pina, who of course is the president of Granada and is Udinese's representative in Spain and Spanish-speaking countries in South America, so he's involved in the Alexis Sanchez transfer, for example. That's what he did when he created Ciudad de Murcia to showcase players. He's moved on to the next level where he's actually president of a club and is doing a similar thing, but as head of a club.
Maybe I'm old-fashioned here. I think it's something you shouldn't be looking into.
Okay, but we're gonna catch up with La Liga after the break. But we do need to take a break now. That's it for Italy. Well done, Juventus and the Invincibles of 2000.
And Udinese.
Well done to Udinese too, and Milan for coming second despite the ridiculous amount of injuries suffered. We'll see you after the break. Bye.
We're back and we're heading over to Spain, and in a minute we will worship at the temple of Jose Mourinho and Real Madrid's record-breaking season. But first we're going to start with quite a remarkable achievement at the other end of the table. Zaragoza, a team who, funny, I thought were in administration and didn't have a pot to go to the bathroom in, but somehow managed to spend a little bit of money and they're staying up. Andy, tell us more.
Well, of course, they did come out of administration about a week ago, so everything's fine now. I'm sure that €150 million debt has just gone away and everyone's forgotten about it. It's an extraordinary business, and there have been protests by the fans throughout the season against the owner, Agapito Iglesias, who is a bit of a snake, I think it's fair to say. At the start of the season, that they were lumbered with this huge debt, and nevertheless, as you say, Gab, they managed to sign players, including an €8.5 million goalkeeper. They only paid €150,000 administration fee out of the club coffers themselves.
This would be, sorry, for those who don't know, this would be the goalkeeper who once kept David De Gea out of the side at Atletico Madrid.
Yeah, but he's been their best player this season.
That's right. He had
then moved to Benfica and did nothing, right?
Yeah, he had a bit of a shambolic season at Benfica, but they managed
he played
to...
marginally more games than you did for Benfica?
That's
Something
right.
like that?
Well, no, he played the whole lot, but he just made horrible mistakes in the most important ones. But Benfica couldn't believe their luck when they managed to sell him on at a profit to a club with absolutely no money.
Do you know who his agent is?
Well, Jorge Mendes, in fact.
Who's also the agent too?
He's the agent of everyone who is everyone in Portuguese football. And it's his third-party ownership fund that paid most of the money for Zaragoza, even though Zaragoza have ended up owning him.
But Iglesias has something to do with this fund.
He's just letting it happen at the club. And he's very happy to, because they've got absolutely no money. They've got no other way of buying players.
What happened to the 50 million in unpaid wages?
Who knows? I mean, this is not just a problem with Zaragoza, of course. They've drip-fed a little bit to the players, but they've not got back everything they've been owed. And they've not paid for a lot of the players as well.
With the unpaid wages, what happens is players sign something like like the equivalent of a CVA, like a voluntary agreement, where, say, the club owes you 100,000, and they give you 20,000 in a lump sum, and they promise to pay you the rest.
So it's like the taxman when you promise.
Kind of, you work out a deal like that. But I just want to make it clear for those out there: third-party ownership is illegal in it's illegal around the world in terms of, third-party ownership is illegal in the Premier League. It's legal in most other countries in the world. What's not legal is what they call third-party influence. In other words, it's illegal to be both the agent and the owner of the player and to influence a move. The difficulty is
proving it, well, because as we say, Roberto, for example, the goalkeeper, actually belongs to Zaragoza officially.
Okay, but I do want to talk about the fact that it's, this is a guy who 5 years ago said that they're going to play Champions League football and yet decided to bring in sort of scraps and terrible players, run into
Roberto thanks you,
administration.
by the way, for that vote of confidence.
Sorry?
Roberto thanks
Well,
you.
he's been their best player, so almost worth the 8 million eventually, because they kept it up. I mean, is this really Manolo Jimenez, or is there something fishy going on?
Well, a lot of people have been talking about games being fixed through their great run over recent weeks. And a couple of people have actually come out and said it. Zaragoza have threatened to sue. We wait to see what happens with that.
What was it? Was it Rayo and was the last 2 games, right, that came under scrutiny?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, let's get more somebody who would know, because I believe my producer's telling me he was there. It's, you know him as La Liga Loca. It's Mr. Tim Stannard. Tim, we're trying to explain the story of Zaragoza here. Both this incredible business with Agapito and third-party ownership and all that wonderful stuff, but also these incredible accusations of match fixing, which always make me a little bit uncomfortable, because I've come to realize, following Italian football over the years, that it's not that easy to look at a game and get suspicious, or rather, if you go in thinking it's suspicious, you'll find almost every game suspicious. Were you suspicified?
You're quite right. I was at the Getafe-Zaragoza game last night, which was a home match for Zaragoza. Really, there were 14,000 Zaragoza fans who made the trip to... Luckily, they played against a team we don't have any fans. They don't really care. We have nothing to play for, so they packed the fans. Agapito Iglesias was sitting just a few meters in front of me, and he was receiving so much abuse from the crowds, things I couldn't possibly repeat. And when Zaragoza stayed up, he disappeared into the stand just a couple of meters from me, and there were tears in his eyes. So obviously... he has some emotions, which a lot of fans would doubt. But as you said, if you look at on paper, that match doesn't look good when you were talking about the topic you said. Getafe had 3 players sent off, and Zaragoza got a penalty for a soft handball. But being at the game, nothing there raised my antennae. And Manolo Jimenez said before the match that they've been playing a lot of teams with things to play for. They've not been playing a series of mid-table dud sides, who can be bought off. They've been playing sides like Villarreal, who are still have a Levante as well, who still had things to play for. So these the accusation to make, and it was made by the Granada president, and there's a Latina who's the relegating manager for Villarreal, said there were some things going on he wasn't sure about, but that's just tough on him, I think. So there are accusations but no evidence. And again, on paper, the game yesterday looked very dodgy, but being there, I didn't see anything.
Well, I wanted to tell you that despite the fact that it looks fishy, do you not think that there's been a great change in the way that they've been playing football? I mean, you can see them through adversity. It's almost like they found they've created a cohesive unit. They've been getting down and dirty. They're aggressive. They seem to have more heart. And do you think that that's got,
Sound like you were describing Joey Barton there. Sorry, go ahead.
That's quite good. No, honestly. Do you not think that that's got anything to do? I mean, they have no mobile phones, no radios. He's banned them. Manolo Jimenez has made a conscious effort to raise the sort of, the team ethic. Do you think that's had a change rather than all the suspicious behavior?
I actually do think it. I've got to say also that Zaragoza are still not that good, but they were persistent, you could say. They were very nervous against Levante in the match last weekend, which got them a 1-0 win. They missed so many chances. Against Getafe as well, they really laboured. They really struggled to break down a team who didn't really have that much to play for, even when they were down to 10 men and 9 men. They deserved to stay up in the end because obviously they got more points than everyone else. And yeah, they had more persistence, more faith. And this is what Manolo Jimenez after the game said. He said, it's not a miracle that we stayed up. I have faith in people. I have faith in hard work. And that's what it was with Zaragoza. He said he was part father, part boss, and he had faith in the players. And they have got 1 or 2 decent players in there. It's not a great side by any means, and they're going to struggle again next season unless something drastically changes and they have a completely new director or direction.
Also, I wanted to just go on to Villarreal, because you were talking about suspicious behaviour, and then Rayo Vallecano get that last-minute goal. That looked to me offside. Was it offside at the time?
I've seen it on a replay as well. It looked at one of those extremely hard to tell. Villarreal have gone down. It's entirely their own fault. They went wrong because they appointed the worst manager possible for that situation, Miguel Angel Lotina. He's horrifically defensive. He got Deportivo relegated last season, a bit of a crime. He's got La Real Sociedad relegated. He came second from getting Espanyol relegated about 5-6 years ago. He over Villarreal, weren't doing brilliantly. It's their third manager, and what he keeps on doing, he keeps playing a back four, a defensive three, and then just a one striker basically. He even plays a fullback sometimes in the front line. What he wants to do is try and scrape a draw. Villarreal only got 2 wins out of their last 9 games. They had hundreds of chances to save themselves. In fact, all they needed was a draw on Sunday night. So they have no one to blame except the manager completely.
Well, to be fair, and I need to stick up for my buddy Giuseppe Rossi, they kind of had their best strikers. Both of them go down through injury, and Rossi.
And Neilmar came back utterly disinterested, which didn't really help either.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he came back fit, personally. I mean, I know it was terrible when he came back, but I think he saw the zoo that Lotina created around him and said, I don't want to know about this. A word on, and I know Mina's favorite Liga-related subject is discussing whether Ronaldo's better than Messi. But we
That's
do
my
anyway.
favorite
Exactly.
topic.
No, that was
I'm off if we're doing that.
But as somebody who loves to follow Eladio Parames on Twitter and some of the other Mourinho acolytes, can you put this in context? All these records, 100 points, all the goals and everything. What does it actually mean? Can you have some sort of pithy way of summing it up?
It just means that Real Madrid and Barcelona have raised the bar of what's needed to win the league title.
Okay, wait, hang on. I'm going to put on my Eladio Parames hat and say, why did you include Barcelona? Barcelona didn't get 100 points.
No, but without getting these 100 points, they needed these 100 points to beat Barcelona. I think Real Madrid had to break these records in order to take down Barcelona. So Jose Mourinho said this was the hardest league title he's had to win. They only dropped points in 6 games. Their home record is as good as their away record, rather the other way around, which was incredible. So every single match they had to pick up the 3 points. So Mourinho had to push, had to gamble, had to work hard than ever before. And so did his players. In order to beat Barcelona, they had to break records. So this is how they did it. You got, again, the 2 best clubs around at the moment, and they just pushed each other higher and higher, knowing there was absolutely no room for failure for either of them.
That's very true, of course, that extra hunger that Real Madrid had this season, starting with Benzema going to fat camp pre-season and coming back saying he'd run through walls for Mourinho.
Wait, is it the same fat camp that Gignac went to when it didn't quite work out for him?
Yeah, and Bafé Gomis, though, who scored 4 in a Champions League game this season.
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Exactly. So he came back saying he would run through walls for Mourinho. He managed to get something out of Kaká, who looked physically shot earlier in the season, and you wonder how they
he
ever
didn't
going to
get much out of him, though. I think towards the end, he's a fading force, unfortunately, in Madrid.
Yeah.
But, okay, what about the race for 4th? Malaga have finally managed it. For a while there, we were we were wondering whether this project was going to pay off. I mean, they seemed to do really well, and then they had around the Christmas time, they just looked uncompetitive. The project looked like it was wavering. They seemed to be sort of like defensively a little bit inept. The attack wasn't clicking. What happened to all of a sudden make them go for it again? Is it because the players started to be paid?
I disagree that it was a race. It was nothing like a race. It was who's the least bad out of the teams going for it. Who's the least? This is one of the worst teams who've come forth, basically, in terms of points. This is turtles going after some lettuce about a metre away over the space of about 9 months. Malaga lost 14 matches. Villarreal lost 15, which shows how poor you had to be, basically, to get this 4th spot. Malaga got very lucky. They've still got a lot of work to do on their project, especially up front, and 1 or 2 things missing in midfield. It doesn't mean they build on that, but they got very lucky. I don't think they're a very good side, and their record shows that. Losing 14 games in a season is a terrible record for what potentially is a Champions League team.
Cheers, Tim, and hasta Malaga. You know what? I hope Pellegrini proves you wrong next season.
I hope so as well. I'm a big fan of him. It'd be nice to see another force maybe challenge what has been an awful Valencia. I'm not very negative. I'm not very positive today. I'm sorry about that.
No. We'll say goodbye to Tim before he infects the rest of us with his negativity. Andy, I would just quickly on Malaga and the Prague, both of you. I looked at it. I liked the idea. So they got Pellegrini, great coach. You know, I thought sort of harshly treated. He did finish second with Real Madrid after all that spending. But then they sound like, you know, this Matthijssen and Demichelis, and I was thinking to myself Van Nistelrooy, and I was thinking to myself like,
Van Nistelrooy, who of course has announced his retirement today.
Well, exactly. But if you've got all this money, would you not go for players who have an upside, a bit like that nice Mr. Mancini did when he had all that money to spend at City?
Well, I can understand why they thought they'd need experience, and you know, it's a lot of
what
those
kind of
players.
experience? Right, so I get a guy from the German league and two guys from the German league to go and play in the Spanish league.
Sure,
that's
but
that the experience I need.
This is the kind of level they're at. You think of Malaga are a relatively small provincial club. The highest they finished before this season was 7th. Really, I think if you're looking at the one player who's made the difference, and it was interesting hearing Tim saying that Malaga had lost 14, Villarreal lost 15. It's got to be Santi Cazorla. Yeah. It has to be. He's carried the team this season.
Santi Cazorla, one of your favourite players, right?
One of my favourite players. The best player in La Liga, if not in Barcelona.
Well, on that Santi Cazorla note, I got to say, Beppe Marotta, if you're watching, if you want to make this Juve fan very happy.
No, I still don't want him for Juventus.
You still don't want anything else. She loves Santi Cazorla, but not good enough for Juve. Yeah. We're going to be back with you. We're back, and the Bundesliga may be over, but there was a bit of a nice little appendix this past weekend. Borussia Dortmund against Bayern Munich. And I always love it when the top two teams meet again in the cup final because, hey, it's a rematch. As it happened, Andy, Mina, wasn't much of a revenge for Bayern Munich, was it?
I really thought that it would be a cagey affair, considering if you look at how it's been in the last few games, you know. But it was like probably one of the best matches that I've ever watched because it was so open. It was not a typically German style of game. You know, it was.
There
just
you are, lapsing into stereotype again. What's a typical German style of game?
You know, sort of, more short passes, midfield battles, that kind of thing. Not generally open end-to-end stuff. Like when you're typifying like German football, that is it. When you're talking about Italian football, it's tactical. When you're talking about English Premier League, you're talking about end-to-end.
But it's got more of an open reputation now, the Bundesliga.
It does, but that game
I suppose this is the new Bundesliga as well as the new order of power, because I guess Dortmund did to an extent what you would expect Bayern to have done, the great Bayern teams to have done to them in the past. Certainly for the first half, and you had Philip Lahm saying we were the better team, which is really stretching it. But for the first half,
but you agreed with that.
No, I said for the first half, like Bayern had the better of the game. They had more territorially, but Dortmund just really ruthlessly slapped them on the break, and they were just killers. They didn't take their foot off their throat.
Yes.
I suggest you update your football cliche handbook from the 1950s. But I want to ask you though.
It's constant digs.
No, it's not. It's not. It's just I set the bar higher here, but I expect more from you. But those defensive mistakes in the first half.
Non-stop defensive mistakes. But this is what's the thing about Borussia Dortmund. They know exactly how to exploit Bayern's weaknesses like no other team I've ever come across.
I think Scunthorpe could have exploited those things when
with the defense like
Neuer
that,
falls over the ball, the other one
agree.
clears the ball. I mean,
sure.
How does that happen?
I'm not sure about Scunthorpe, but
I mean, these are professionals, yeah?
Neuer can kick it a really long way. Why does he try and play with his feet?
Yeah, but it's important to note that it was just not the defence only. It was the fact that the midfield just seemed to be letting these people through. No one was picking up the runners.
Schweinsteiger's not right.
Gomez,
no, absolutely.
Gomez was terrible, in my opinion. And then when you look at, Gundogan for Borussia Dortmund, who was...
Gundogan's a monster, isn't he?
He's been excellent since winter.
Beauty,
Yeah,
Shinji Kagawa, all that creativity. And then you've got these, the midfield of Bayern just letting these runners go through. They were just not interested in trying to pick them up, defend against them, stop them in any way.
To help us better understand and decipher this, we've got our boy James Sturgis from Bundesliga.com. James, we've been sitting here, we've been moaning about Bayern's defensive errors. Do you have a rational explanation? Jupp Heynckes said in the first half, Borussia Dortmund created one chance and scored 3 goals, and it was Bayern's defensive errors that were the mistake. How does this happen? Isn't he the manager? Shouldn't he be fixing it?
Well, he should, but I don't know what really went wrong for Bayern. They were completely their own worst enemies on the night, and at the same time, I really do think credit has to go to Dortmund because they completely exploited the chances they had. They were ruthless in front of goal, and Lewandowski, Kagawa in particular. Mina highlighted an important point there, not picking up the runners in midfield. Kagawa in particular, for me, I mean, really, Bayern should have taken a leaf out of Augsburg's book, because when Augsburg man-marked him with Hajime Hosogai, Kagawa rarely was able to influence that game. And I was hoping Bayern would learn from their mistakes from the recent matches this season. But, 5 times in a row now for Dortmund, and they've just worked Bayern out, I think.
What I wanted to bring up, James, is if we're talking about going forward and Dortmund maybe building an era where they can rival Bayern over the long term, they did it without Götze and Marco Reus as well.
Well, he's not their player yet, to be fair.
But he will be next season if we're talking about building a dynasty.
No, certainly. And Götze and Reus will be 2 key parts of that. Obviously, it's starting to look more and more like Kagawa is going to leave now, with Sir Alex being in the stands and whatnot. Granted, he's been linked with Mats Hummels and Robert Lewandowski as well today. But those are the types of key players that I think if Dortmund can keep in place, granted, right now, they can actually afford to lose a Kagawa. It would be a great loss for them and a great loss for the Bundesliga. But with Reus coming in the summer, he's a like-for-like replacement, can play in the 10 in behind the striker. And so they can actually afford to maybe cash in on Kagawa. And that's what the hierarchy is constantly saying, is that he's the only player we're willing to sell. And so if they can hold on to their pieces, they've got everything that they need to have that dynasty under Jurgen Klopp. And obviously Klopp himself is a huge part of that. He's guided them to their first double now, domestic double of the League and Cup. And so really everything looks great for Dortmund right now. As you said, Andy, in the beginning there, they are starting to be one of the teams that, along with others, are redefining the style of German football. They play on the counter-attack. They like to move the ball a little quicker through the midfield. And so they are starting to revolutionise German football. And with that, they're starting to win titles as well.
James, it's interesting. Obviously, Lucas Barrios is gone. He's gone for the for the big contract in China, where I think he'll be the 2nd highest paid player over there after Dario Conca, but or possibly after Anelka as well.
I was thinking Anelka.
Conca's got that crazy contract, doesn't he?
Yeah,
anyway,
he's got a crazy.
Anelka's got a rather ridiculous one too.
Who?
Anelka has got a ridiculous
That's right,
one.
but I'm wondering, they're going to need another striker, aren't they? Perhaps a more traditional one than Lewandowski.
Yeah, and I mean, people are talking about the fact that they might even maybe choose to use Reus in the role occasionally if needs be, but I think they'll look to bring in someone in the summer that can play behind Lewandowski. Obviously, there's a couple of young German players that have been impressing in the Zweite Bundesliga, but I think they're going to look really abroad to bring in a striker if they're going to. A name that pops to mind, really, I don't have one that I can think, they should definitely go for him off the top of my head, but they certainly need a tweak here and there. And maybe one in the centre of defence as well, because Felipe Santana, I think he's going to leave, and they need a backup for Subotic and Hummels because, Subotic in particular has proven to be a little injury-prone, granted more facial injuries than, wear and tear, but they certainly need a backup there and a backup for Lewandowski.
James, last time we talked about Hertha Berlin and how they were in the playoffs. They're playing Fortuna Düsseldorf. We all joked about Hertha Berlin's inexperienced manager, which, actually I'm being ironic here. He's actually very old and very experienced. It's Otto Rehhagel, but didn't do much good against Fortuna Düsseldorf, did it? They lost 2-1.
Yeah, they lost 2-1. They did go in front through Robin Hubnik, but then Düsseldorf really turned the game on its head in the second half. They just came out with this almost no. They couldn't. They had nothing to lose at that point, Düsseldorf, and they just went for it. And they really put Hertha on the back foot, kept them there. And Hertha just looked unsure of themselves in the second half. And it was strange because they were in complete control first half. It really looked like it was going to be a comfortable home win for them. And Düsseldorf came out of nowhere, but it's a massive setback for them. Obviously, Düsseldorf will be brimming with confidence now, whereas Hertha, coming off the back of a bad season, their morale is a bit low right now. And at the same time, part of me feels there's a lesson to learn here for Hertha. I think Michael Preetz, we've talked about him, I've talked about him extensively, and the mistake he made in letting Marcus Babel go, no matter the extenuating circumstances. But the thing is, I feel they need to learn their lesson by getting relegated in a sense, and so it almost might be sweet justice that Düsseldorf managed to pull this one off.
It has been a 15-year-long absence for Düsseldorf. But I wanted to tell you from the fans' perspective, do they blame the coach or the players, or do they blame the management of the team that's been so utterly dismal for Hertha Berlin?
Yeah, Preetz has come under a lot of flack for what's happened this season, really. The uncertainty in the managerial role, 2 changes in quick succession when Skibbe came in and then Rehhagel. And really, it's just been a calamity of errors off the pitch. And under Skibbe, they went through a ridiculous losing streak where they lost every game that he was in charge of. And I think I said it in the last episode, that just destroyed their morale completely, and there was no real coming back from that. They somehow managed to save themselves on the last day of the season, but now it's almost a case of they seem to be battling every odd possible, and they're really up against it in the second leg.
James, thank you so much. Before we go to the break, I want to get your view on something, which I've struggled. We've all met footballers. We all know that they've got a lot of money, and it's difficult to know when enough money is enough money.
It's never enough.
Well, evidently, we were all praising Raul to high heaven, and he's been a class act, and a bit like Del Piero and so on. And then, we said, oh, how emotional, he's leaving Schalke, he's done so well there. And he goes and he signs for Al Sadd in Qatar. And he's not the only one. I don't want to pick on him. I'm assuming nobody here believes he did it because he's fascinated by the culture in Qatar.
Wants to raise the profile of the Qatari game.
Right. I'm guessing
well, perhaps that money has to go a long way. I remember reading when Barcelona were playing in Bayer Leverkusen, he travelled from his home in Dusseldorf to see the Barcelona players at the hotel. And I was reading this report in a Spanish paper.
Really,
it said,
rent a unicorn for the day?
It said he's with his wife and 5 children. 5 children. So clearly that money has got to go a long way. So perhaps it's all in the fund for the future.
How expensive are children that you have to take this contract? But I mean, I don't know.
What do you think? Is it weird to you? I mean, because
it is because
Pep Guardiola, of course, is another one who kind of did the same thing and continues to do it.
Well, I think part of it maybe, I don't want to say quitting because, of course, he's still going on to play competitive football to an extent, but quitting at the top. Because I was speaking to some Schalke fans, actually, at the Europa League final last week, and they were saying, from an international perspective, Raul's been great. And it is great to have Raul play for your team. But there are a lot of games where you don't even notice that he's there, that he's not really doing something. So, all these headline moments and all these emotional moments.
For a little bit.
Well, again, I think that's something you could argue for the international market. I mean, I don't think people abroad really appreciate what a huge club Schalke are. They're like the 5th, 6th best supported club in Europe in terms of match day attendances. So I guess that's something for the publicity as well. But I think the team needed to move on, and they wanted to put all their financial efforts into keeping Huntelaar.
Well, who are we to say that you shouldn't go and cash in your chips in Qatar or the Emirates? And with that in mind, if there's a wealthy Qatari out there who wants to pay me and Mina to come and
yes,
Mina and I would be very happy to come and sit in your front room.
Especially since children are so expensive.
Exactly, since children are expensive. I think that's our quote of the day. We're going to be back.
Hello and welcome back to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. Now we move on to Turkey, and what a dramatic final that was. And now Galatasaray have won their 18th league title to match Fenerbahce with 18. And of course, riots erupted. So I want to talk to you, Andy, about that, because I know that you're a Turkish fan. I saw Melo's pictures, Felipe Melo, and him celebrating Galatasaray's title.
Aboué riding him like a horse across the pitch.
That is disturbing.
Well,
there we go, bingo.
Well, at least, there it is. Well, at least if he left Juventus, he managed to win the title somewhere else. But I wanted to ask you, it was very much a deserved victory for them, wouldn't you say?
Well, it was, because they finished the 34-game league season 9 points clear at the top. They had good, experienced players under Fatih Terim, a very experienced, very good coach. So, I think they went about it the right way. I think you have to credit Fenerbahce because they had this match-fixing thing hanging over them all season. They lost some important players like Diego Lugano, Mamadou Niang, and they managed to recover and get on with it. But Galatasaray have been far the better and the calmer team over the season. And I think that showed in that last game of the playoff where everything was going on, that they really just dealt with it apart from, you could argue, Rzouki getting sent off for that second booking really stupidly. I can't remember the last time I saw a game where two players, one from each side, both got sent off for kicking the ball away. It's ludicrous in such a high pressure game. But nevertheless, Galatasaray, as they did when they played away at Fenerbahce in the league 2 months ago, that they managed to just tough it out in the moments that mattered. So they didn't only play the best football, but they were the mentally strongest, I think.
What'd you make of the playoffs?
Well, I think when you've got questions hanging over the integrity of the league, if you get to a point, you decide, well, all right, we'll call this the first season where the team with the most points at the end of the league doesn't win the league. It's ridiculous. I think it would have looked terrible if Fenerbahce had come back to win it after that.
Thought, yeah.
It would have looked awful. I think
and they did well in the playoffs.
Yeah, they really did. Well, of course, going into the last game, they were just 1 point behind Galatasaray. So if they'd have won that home game, they would have retained their league championship, and all hell would have broken loose. Well, obviously, all hell did break loose to a certain extent.
Yes.
And the Galatasaray players, after briefly considering partying on the pitch away at Fenerbahce, decided they would leave protected by the riot police and go and celebrate in the dressing room as well. Even Felipe Melo wasn't mad enough to stay out there, which I think says something.
But I wanted to say, is it more a victory of the fact that the team did so well and the Unite and all the players that they bought, or is it such great management? Their president who came in and promised them that they were going to do well. He brought in a good coach interim, and he just put together this great ambitious side that really want to go forward. So is really credit for the great management behind this team, or?
Well, I think that's part of it as well. But I think Melo, for example, who's been their player of the season, he's been absolutely outstanding.
Player of the season last season.
Rather incongruously wearing the number 10 shirt. But nevertheless, he's got this feeling of a bit of liberty about him as well. He scored a dozen goals too. Yeah, he does. And he said a couple of months ago, I love it here, I want to stay forever. Financially, they don't know if that will be possible yet. But, I think making a player like that who's got ability but has had a few issues with his temperament, to make him feel loved and important, I think has been, as you say, a real tribute to the way Terim has managed everything.
The same thing with the Bue as well. I mean, we talked about how Milan were a bit of an asylum this season, but I think Galatasaray kind of run them close, don't they?
Yeah, certainly. And I think you have to say a word for Johan Elmander as well, another refugee from the Premier League who's worked his socks off in every single game. It's a real shame. It looks as if he's going to miss the Euros now. He came off with a broken foot in that game, and he's going to be out for a minimum of a month. So it's a big boost for England and France, I suppose.
Okay, just a quick one on Fenerbahce. They want to take themselves away from the league because they're so annoyed with with the news going against them, with the way that things have been handled, with the fact that they've been so involved in this whole match fixing thing and harshly done by in their eyes. Do you think that their threats are just empty threats?
Well, I think they probably are. I think
planning to break away.
No. I think the threats are probably empty. They're not going to have the league from last year, the 2011 league, taken off them despite Trabzonspor's protests. And I think really, despite the protests of Galatasaray fans, and they've been out on the streets protesting for justice in Turkish football, because of course they've changed their penalties. So now, even if Fenerbahce are found completely guilty of match fixing, they can't be relegated. They can get a maximum 12-point deduction. It's in everyone's best interest, basically, if Fenerbahce don't go down, because Fenerbahce versus Galatasaray is the big rivalry. Economically, it's really important to maintain that.
Now, if only Italy felt the same way and Juventus weren't relegated in 2006, but sadly...
That's right, where you could get all your old titles back, even the ones you didn't win.
Well, they're still putting you in the bus anyway, aren't they?
Exactly.
They're real titles. They were won on the pitch and they were won in the World Cup. That France-Italy game had Juventus players through and through. But anyway, I won't argue this case anymore. Because I'm telling you, these were
Juventus
great
won the World Cup as well. Well done.
They practically did.
There you go.
They practically did. They were the best team. There's no way that Capello's team wasn't the best team in the title that season.
In the world.
Anyway, officially 28. We're not going to talk about Italy. That is all we have time for the World Football Show. Next week, we'll be reviewing the season in general. But do catch us, same time, same place, same football chat next week. Thank you from all of us, Andy Brassell, Gabriele Marcotti, and Mina and Rzouki. Bye.
a heck of an achievement in the circumstances.
It is.
It
was
has to
definitely
be
a
said.
heck of an achievement, and I think this is definitely a scudetto for the champions who decided to stay with the old lady despite the circumstances, like your Trezeguets and your Camoraneses, and of course Del Piero and Gianluigi Buffon. Do you think that this is the start of a new cycle, considering the fact that Milan have to start from afresh? So do Inter. They're going through their own sort of revolutionising period. Then you've got Napoli that may or may not keep their stars. Udinese that's constantly selling.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting point that you say about the possibility of a new era when we're talking so much about Del Piero. Because, of course, I think it's interesting. As Gab said, he contributed to a certain extent. The late goal against Lazio, for example, is something we really think about. But I find it extraordinary they had to rely on that, because people said at the start of the season, Juventus have got quite a thin squad, they've got a good first 11, but they'll struggle to change things up.
Yeah.
I looked at the squad and I didn't think that was the case, but attacking-wise, they really did struggle with that.
Yes.
So I think,
and in the same way, if you look at those Milan players, with the exception of Nesta, who could still turn it on, as you know,
Provide
as
something.
we saw, you know, most of these other guys, Gattuso struggled with
You don't
injuries.
think Seedorf?
Seedorf is the wild card, but Seedorf, we're not sure he's going. Seedorf has surprised us so many times. But what I love, Andy, is the fact that we don't know where these guys are going. The possibility of Seedorf going to Brazil actually really excites me. I'm blanking on it, but who was it? Petkovic. Do you remember Petkovic, the legendary Yugoslav who moved to
very successful, but a very rare example of a successful overseas player. In
but
Brazilian
they idolized
football.
it. He was like better in Brazil than he was in Europe.
Yeah.
That's what I loved about it.
I think Seedorf will be great wherever he goes. But I want us to concentrate on Juventus clinching the title. And
Surprise.
whether you think, simply because we're going to talk to about Milan afterwards. I think this is a huge momentous occasion for a club that's gone 6 years without really winning anything. So
You won the Serie B title, though. That
hello and welcome to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm Mina Rzouki and I'm joined by my usual co-host Gabriella Marcotti. And of course we have a new guest today, that is Andy Brassell. Welcome to you both.
not really new, is it? We've had him on before, but
Okay,
it's
a
great to have him
recurring
here in
guest.
person.
New for this week.
Yeah.
New for this week.
I like three-dimensional Andy Brassell a lot better than I like sort of flat two-dimensional Andy Brassell.
I know what you mean when you just see it face, right?
Exactly. You can touch him, you can feel him, see?
I swear he's real. It's been an emotional weekend in Italy. It's been a fantastic weekend all over Europe in general. We've now found out to the champions of all the countries except for maybe France, which we will find out next week. But today we'll be chatting to you about world football in general, and we're going to start off with my favourite league, Italy. So we've lost. Well, I was going to say Warriors of the Night, but considering I don't know what that term means to Gab, we're going to say we lost Del Piero. He's only got one game left, which will be the Coppa Italia. We saw Rino Gattuso crying. We saw Inzaghi crying. Alessandro Nesta, Clarence Seedorf, Zambrotta all waved goodbye to Milan. What do you guys think? This is it, a new era. Is it all over? And is Juventus going to start a new winning cycle?
Well, obviously Del Piero was a fantastic player for Juve. I think for most of his 19 years he was a real class act, and I think an inspiration even to neutrals. But I mean, it's momentous. He's going away and so on. But the reality is Del Piero wasn't a part of this Juve side this season. He was there. He was in the dressing room. He didn't create problems. But I think it's quite clear that, you know, in some ways, I don't think his departure is going to affect Juve in any way.
I think it's not just how Milan and Inter will react, but how Juventus build on this. Because, you know, in another season, all those draws could have really cost them. Now, it's clear that Conte has sort of engineered this real togetherness and there's real doggedness. And I think if you saw in the Coppa Italia semi-final, they came back with that Vucinic goal, for example. That's a really good example of that shows the attitude they had that got them through the season. But still, those draws could have cost them. They definitely need something at the sharp end.
But I think
Something they can solve with money?
Well, yeah, right, money solves a lot of problems. But I think, realistically, I think this is a great time to be a Juve fan because Commercially, they have all their ducks in the row. You know, that hasn't been the problem. The problem's been since they came back, they made some very foolish decisions, I think, in terms of transfers, and, you know, maybe in terms of managers as well. But now they have the stadium, they've got the revenue coming in, they're ready to tap into it. And by contrast, you look at the competition, and you know, Inter and Milan, you know, they're going to have to cut. They don't have the stadium revenue. They've got these, you know,